Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to probably episode 6, because Jonathan told me that I did 2 episode 4s. This is probably episode 6 of the AV experience, where we routinely lose track of what episode we're on. I'm losing track of what we're doing now, but I think today's episode is about where Mwave is going, and I kind of wanted to talk about, briefly go on a little bit of a rant on upper end gear and how people respond to others that buy said gear on social media, right? So I'll maybe get on my soapbox a little bit later. But how have you been, Jonathan? How are things with you?
I'm doing good. This was a nice week. I don't really have anything to report.
A
Pretty
nice
casual
week.
week. Yeah. Just like
Okay.
a relaxing week after our crazy vacation antics and on
Mm.
call from the week before. So,
So
yeah,
no more stories?
just a little less stress this week, which is
No.
a good thing.
No, like trailer detaching from the back of your truck and then pulling up next to me. That actually happened to my dad at one point. He was driving on the highway and he felt a shake, and he looks out his driver's side window and his trailer is next to him on the highway. So he had
Oh,
to push it.
no.
He had to push it off the road onto the center part. Um, yeah, it just broke off the tongue. So that was
Was
an
it hanging on the
experience.
chains then, or did it break loose
No,
there
it
too?
detached itself. It was driving itself to the highway.
Oh, my
It
goodness.
could have gone a lot worse, but could have been on America's Funniest Home Videos, but could have also been on an episode of Cops.
Faces of death.
Yeah,
Like,
could have been.
could have gone a lot of ways.
It could have gone a lot of ways. Um, Big thing here, my son is building a computer right now, so that's a step into his adulthood, for me at
Man,
least.
don't you think video cards have gotten kind of like sort of ridiculously priced over these years? Do you remember when we used to buy our video cards for like save up and get a couple $100s, and now if you want like a top tier card, you're paying $1,000 or $800?
Yeah, I mean he already had, so that's not a problem. He's putting it together right now, I should say. So he's building it, like physically building it.
Uh-huh.
So I helped him last time, kind of showed him how to do it, and this time I'm like, you're on your own. If you can't figure something out, YouTube it, and then I will. If you really can't figure it out, then I will help you. But he knows if I say that I'm serious. You don't just. I'm gonna. He knows that if he comes and asks me after I've said that, I'm just gonna say, well, figure it out.
Yeah.
Sorry, but he'll figure it out.
So all of that is fine. Things only go in one place on PCs for
Yeah.
many decades, but the question mark that might come out is, did you tell them how to apply thermal paste, or
I
did you
did
give them
that
any
with
guidance
him.
there?
I didn't have him do that on its own. Not that he would necessarily hurt anything,
Yeah.
because it's not conductive and he's not doing liquid metal. But
There's some
No.
funny videos out there online of people that didn't know how to apply it, techs and stuff, see it, and it's like squirted all over the motherboard and squeezes out when they.
like the one. What was that one that was a meme for a while?
Oh yeah, there was a website that did it wrong, right?
What was that on?
I
It
can't
was
remember
some
the name
big
of it either.
website, and it was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. Oh man, I remember that. I think it was the guy's first time building a computer, and they're like, "Oh, you should make a video about your experience," and then it was awful. It was a horrific experience.
Well,
that did no one
only
justice.
because it was a how-to and he was doing things wrong.
Yes.
Was it like an Ars Technica site or something? I can't remember what site it was.
I don't think
but
it was Ars Technica.
It was a very well-known site, I think.
There's another one. What's the other big one? It's
I'm
somebody's
gonna web
name.
search it real quick.
It's somebody's name. I'm surprised chat doesn't know. Chat, why don't you know? You're supposed to know. I'm trying to think if I did anything else. My daughter had a soccer game today. Son's doing basketball tryouts. Getting ready for CEDIA. Did you decide if you're going to CEDIA? You still haven't decided.
I'm probably not going. I have some responsibilities that I'd have to get out of now because I didn't cancel it. So it makes it easier to say no at this point. So probably not.
That's your excuse for saying no?
Well, it was like when I was originally deciding I didn't have the responsibility, and now I've been assigned that responsibility. It's something at church. So it's like, yeah, I don't know.
That makes sense. Something else. So other news that's exciting. I bought a new camera. So that's why I'm using my laptop camera.
Why is the new camera not plugged in?
Because it's not here yet.
Oh.
And I took this one down. I don't remember why I took this one down already, but I did. So now I'm using my phone's camera. The Verge. They say it's the Verge.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That sounds right.
I don't.
So,
Although I'd never really used that site as a resource, but
I
I
didn't
think it
either.
was something with a V.
Is the Verge known for PC content? He's 10, and you're getting him an RTX 5090. Man, that's the thing.
That's nice.
Yeah, my son's using a 2080S right now, which isn't bad.
No, that's a
Not
good card.
bad. But yeah, getting a new camera. So if anybody wants a Fujifilm X-T3,
That was a really good looking camera.
yeah, just going to something different. Going full frame. Nikon Z8 is the direction I went.
I swapped out. This is an old Canon EOS Rebel 70i, or what is it? T7i. I'm not a camera guy, but my webcam experience has been pretty poor, and this isn't great either. It's an old camera, but it looks better than my webcam camera right now. I think that was part of the reason I was a little late starting, was trying to get this rigged up.
Wait, what is that?
It's
GoPro?
it's a EOS Rebel T7i. It's my
I didn't
wife's
know you went
camera.
down that path.
I haven't. This is my wife's camera. She let me try it to see if it's
Is
something I
this
want
the
to
first
pursue.
time? I was going to say your lighting looks a lot better than it usually does.
Well, and I haven't done what I normally do with my lighting, so let me see if it holds true if I switch it. But go ahead. Let me do that in the
I
background.
don't have any go ahead. I'm waiting to criticize you and your lighting. That looks a lot better.
It's clearer.
It is very much clearer. And you're not.
I'm a little bit like Oompa Loompa yellow for some reason.
You could change the ISO or something. No, I think you're good. I don't think you're Oompa Loompa yellow. Oompa Loompa. They're orange, not yellow. Come on.
Hey, chat, are our voices matched? We didn't have a chance because it's my fault since I was getting in here late messing with this camera. Are our voices matched, level matched, before we go on for the whole podcast? And then someone's at the end like, you guys were 20 dB difference.
Like they always do.
Yeah.
We're going to wait till the very end when you're saying bye to tell you that you don't sound good.
We had one guy say, I'm not going to listen to you anymore because you're so despaired on the volume differences.
You know, maybe we did that intentionally. Didn't like you anyway.
Thinning out the herd.
Didn't like you anyway. Anything else new? I had a sub amp blow up. So that was fun.
What
Didn't
did you,
actually blow
how?
up. It just stopped working. So the company, was a new line for them. And the Mad VR Experience Centers, it's on the edge, right, of technology. So there's a lot of new things that are in there. And we learned that they had to fix some controller stuff. So it's not a big deal. I mean, I lost 4 of the 21s. So lost a decent amount of headroom, but it's
you can't tell the difference. Don't lie to me. I know you can't tell the
Chris
difference.
Stovall, maybe a DB.
There's so many subs in there. You're like 421's gone.
I was listening to Chris when he said Ryan's maybe a DB quiet, and you're sitting here. You can't tell the difference.
I was talking about your 4 subs that are out of your like 26 subs.
I did notice that I was turning it up, like I was having to turn the bass up. So I don't think I consciously noticed, but I subconsciously was turning it up more. So I got to get that fixed. We will get that fixed. I've been talking to the guys about that. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. And then I finally fixed my HDMI issue.
Oh yeah?
Finally, I've said this multiple times, but I'm pretty sure we got it this time. I have been through so many things. It has been hell. It's been hell. HDMI. Why did we decide to take a technology that was designed to go 2 meters and then turn it into what it is today? Why did we do that? We have DisplayPort. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Why couldn't we use, not that USB is any better, but why couldn't we use USB-C or Thunderbolt, something, or fiber?
It's that bandwidth, man. Nothing else on the market is 40 or 48 even gigabit per second. Fiber could be, sure. You're right. But they already have fiber HDMI. I mean, they have that.
I know, but it's converting. Why did we have to do the whole HDMI thing?
Make like a toss link for HDMI where it's built into both sides.
Yeah, what are we
Sure.
doing? Like,
Sure.
why did we do this? And it's so annoying. So what it ended up being is it was only one source, okay? It was only one source that was causing the problem. And that source supposedly had an unstable voltage on the output. And since the AV Pro Edge 8x8 matrix is a matrix, it's not using like one-to-one. It's having to send out the video and audio to multiple different in and outs. It was more susceptible to this voltage irregularity. And that was causing a loss of sync. And we started figuring this out when I put in a scaler. I wasn't using the scaling part, but I was using the voltage regulation part. And I guess it didn't do something correctly. And then I started losing audio and video at different times. So we could tell that something was going on the inputs. Like it was getting into the matrix and then it was like, and didn't know where to go. So what we ended up doing is I took a $35 splitter, an HDMI splitter, 48 gigabit per second, 1 in, 2 out, and used that as a voltage regulator. So the source goes into it and it goes into the switch and it is happy. I don't know.
For how long? That's the question.
No, don't do that.
I mean,
Jonathan.
seriously.
Don't do that. No. God. Oh, don't do that. Don't curse me. How long? I'm going to curse your cables so that next time you do a demo, they fail. Why would you do that? So then another thing that we noticed was in some other testing, HDCP is another thing that is just awful, right? The encryption through HDMI. So we already have the awfulness that is HDMI. Who in their right mind thought we're going to layer more awfulness on top of something that is already awful and put them together?
Yeah.
And then when that second thing that is awful fails, we're not going to tell you. It's just going to be a black screen. It's how we're going to make it not work. We're not going to tell you why. It's just not going to work. Why? Who does this? Why? If I was not in the industry, I would and had an understanding of what's going on, I would have been so mad. I don't know that I'd be in home theater anymore.
Just walk away.
I'm done. Just walk away, leave the room, lock it, just be over. Like, I don't get it. I do not understand. So this issue, we found that NVIDIA GPUs, okay, I am so far down the rabbit hole on this one. I don't even know that anybody else has encountered this knowingly. I don't know. But in this one, we found that voltage output for the HDCP, because AOC, it doesn't put the copper in the EDID and the HDCP information are still on copper. They're not transmitted over fiber. Okay, so that's one of the problems. Why they do that, I don't know. Again, why? Why? We care about the voltage and the gain and all this other stuff when we're dealing with any other type of wire. But we're going to send something with a 30-meter AOC with an itty-bitty-bitty copper wire, and it's going to work every time. And we're not going to tell you when it doesn't work. It's just going to be a black screen. So in this case, when it was on the HDMI output, it didn't work. It would just be a black screen. The only way I could figure out that it was an HDCP problem is in the great wisdom of Matthias, the guy behind MadVR, in the Envy, if there is an HDCP error, it tells you that there's an HDCP error because it'll say you need an HDCP 2.2 compliant display if it can't do it. No other device does that. It'll just be a black screen. You'll have no idea that there's an encryption error. On the HDMI output, it was unhappy about it. But if you used a DisplayPort to HDMI converter and use the DisplayPort, it works.
Why? Does
No idea.
DisplayPort not have HDCP?
No, it does. No idea. No clue.
Hmm.
So something, I'm assuming the voltage output on the display port out on the NVIDIA card is different and somehow more stable than it is on the HDMI.
So is your display port an active cable? Because they have active
It's an active
converters.
adapter.
That's
It's an
probably
active
it
adapter.
then, right?
Well,
because it might be boosting the voltage or something.
but it's getting the voltage from the display port. It's not
It's not powered.
No. What it could be, though, is, and I'm sorry if you can hear my daughter screaming in the background because she's being tickled by her brother.
Cannot.
What it could be is that the HDMI is HDMI 2.1, and DisplayPort, because it's DisplayPort, I think they're up to 1.4, is not. So it's like HDMI 2.0 equivalent. So potentially, I don't know, but it works. The same will work if I put the splitter on the HDMI output. I never thought when I was first getting into this hobby that I would be banging my head into my desk about voltages on HDMI. I never I never thought I'd be this far down the rabbit hole, but man, that was infuriating. Because when you think about it, there's so many devices in a signal chain. Like, how do you narrow it down? If you don't do proper troubleshooting, you are just in for a world of pain and anguish and suffering and all by yourself. It's like being locked in an isolation chamber all alone.
I think this is going to have to be changed from the AV Experience to the HDMI Rant podcast.
Quite possibly. Okay, I'm done with that.
There's a lot of things in here, but since we had the trouble with login, I can't star any of it, so you'll have to kind of catch up with the chat.
Let me go make sure I go back and grab some of these. Guys, I'm starring them. I have starred a few of them. So let's talk about Mwave here real quick, or for a little bit. Mwave, so that's today's topic. What do you want from Mwave? Chad, I want to know what you want from Mwave. What I want from Mwave, and Jonathan, feel free to chime in, is I want us to kind of go back to the roots. Go back to more comparisons that I kind of got away from this year because they take a lot of time. More comparisons, more knowledge, more education. I think I mentioned this to you a little bit. I don't think I'm going to charge anybody to come to the show. I'll make it like a donation thing where you can donate, but I don't like the idea of putting knowledge behind a wall, right? I understand that you got to make sure that you're not losing money, and I'm not worried about that. But I want to make sure that anybody that has the opportunity to come is able to come. And I think that's really important because I want as many people to be successful in this space as possible. So what the other part that I'd like to do is to allow people to do comparisons because I can't do them all. And Jonathan, I think you and I talked about this a little bit. And I'd like to be able to, hopefully, if the donation stuff, if people are generous, be able to compensate people for their time because I would not want to be doing that stuff and how can I put this? Donating that much of my time for free. I'd want something out of it because I think that's fair. I mean, that's how any of this goes. So I want Mwave to go back to the roots. Adam Pelt said something really interesting. I don't know if we talked about this, but he said that when he was at Mwave, he noticed that in all of the talks, all of the seminars that were going on, they were at least half full. And there were hundreds of seats in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at least half full. If you go to something like Cedia, there's like a handful of people. And there's tens of thousands of people at Cedia. And there's only a handful of people that go to these talks. So I think there's a lot of potential behind doing something like that. A lot of vendors and a lot of prominent people are excited about it. I just got to figure out and see what people want. And I want to make it partly a show by the people, for the people, if you will. You're smirking, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No, I like where your head's at, but I mean, you have to kind of like probably. We haven't had these conversations before for anyone listening. These are all
No.
Ryan's creative juices flowing.
Yes.
Um, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think that's very cool. I think the comparison stuff was fun. The first few years, and we have lots of ideas for that, and you could probably engage some of the KC guys to kind of help with that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But it's a big time commitment, right? And it's also, you're kind of in the spotlight. You're sharing it with people that you don't know, and that's a big ask of people. I guess I can put it up and say if anybody wants to do something, and not ask anybody, and just say, hey, you can, if you want to, if there's something you'd like to do, let me know. And that goes for anybody that's listening on this show. If there's something that you want to do and you think that you've got the gumption to be able to do one of these comparisons, they are a lot of work. They're a lot of work to figure out, to put together, and then you got to run them. And you got to run them multiple times for people. It's not just kind of a one and done, because the show runs all weekend. So it's a big thing. But if anybody wants to do it, I think it's a great experience. You meet a lot of people, and I know sometimes it feels like I'm gonna have a panic attack as I'm moving up to the show, because I'm just having all this anxiety. But I think it's I come after it. I'm like, man, that was worth it.
yeah. So one thing I want to, and this is me hearing it for this first time with the audience too. One thing I've really appreciated about the Mwave comparisons is that they were put on by very trusted parties. Like the people that put them on were mature enthusiasts, but who had like a background in it or knowledge to be able to do it. You're gonna still have to curate who's allowed to do the demonstrations.
I would
to make
agree.
sure that they're
Oh yeah,
fair and well done. That there isn't bias leaking into it, and it's just, yeah.
I absolutely agree.
So I'm just saying you might have to like rein back a little bit of anyone that wants to do it can do it type thing, because they might have an agenda, and that wasn't the spirit of any of this comparisons that have been done so far. They weren't done by vendors. They weren't done by somebody who had something to prove. It was like, here is what happens, A and B. Now you make the decision. You weren't led to an opinion. It were experienced and came to your own conclusion, and that's the way those should be done. Continue to be done.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So that's where I'd like to go, but I want to hear from chat where you'd want to go. Miscreants out there saying some stuff. I like the ideas, Miscreant. That's Kevin, by the way, if I remember correctly. The problem with some of those, like the acoustic panels, is that gets really hard. There's a lot of moving parts in that with raising and lowering things. And those rooms are big. They're not small. So you got to draw the line somewhere of what is feasible and what makes the most sense and what we can make happen. You can do that on a smaller level, like showing how sound frequencies, if you're close enough to the wall for a first reflection and have the mic close enough in a near field position, what is happening with the first reflection point and how you can tame that using acoustic panels. And you can show the difference that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be an entire room. And you could turn it more into a lecture. There are a lot of variables, but I think, Jonathan, would you agree that we've done a pretty good job of eliminating a lot of those variables in the past?
Yeah, like surprisingly well. Like even when it's impossible to control the variables, you made it very clear. Like when we had the subwoofer meet and the subwoofers were placed in a line across the row and the room interacts differently with the placement, it was made very clear that this the people who were auditioning needed to move their seats to accommodate for that and take like longer than just a 1 second, one seat, listen and leave, because you weren't going to get a fair comparison in that point. No. So like when you have caveats because of the size of the room or because of limitations of the experiment, that you announce that very well. And I think, frankly, I was very surprised and impressed and pleased, and so was the rest of the Kansas City group, with the quality of the experimentation that you guys have done, with you and Youth Men leading it, with like speaker wire tests and so forth. Buying $6,000 or $7,000 speaker wire, comparing it to coat hangers. Who does that? Nobody at a trade show, because they don't want that $7,000 speaker wire that's promoted there to come out sounding the same as the coat hanger. They can't afford it. They won't let that happen. So only at Mwave do you get that kind of thing. And when you had the processors, and you had like, what was it, like 4 processors comparing auto EQ in the same room with like, 5 processors, quick switch. That was awesome. I've never seen that done anywhere. That was really cool. So like I saw MW had put in there. We talked about it in the previous years. In fact, having a thing, hey, let's compare what happens at 15 hertz and below. Let's watch this movie clip with 15 hertz rolled off, and let's watch it with full range sealed subwoofers. What does 21 hertz sound like compared to 16 hertz? You know, stuff like that would be a great room because a lot
That
of people don't know
stuff,
that.
that stuff that if you did it, you could lean on the vendors a little bit more to do. Like I could get a Sendo to do something like that in their room and have Storm be able to put in a curtain and say, because you would just really need the equipment that is capable of doing that.
And a lot of it to fill a room that
Yes.
big. You'd want one of your smaller rooms probably to be able to pressurize
And
it
I
correctly.
think like with how Ascendo had their room last year or how JTR Jeff had their room, I mean, you could do that. Ascendo's 1616s, they had them turned down a lot.
That room would be the right one to do a test like that in
Yes,
because
I
it's the
agree.
smaller size.
I agree. I think that would be a good one. And I'd like to lean on the vendors in the ways that we could, where we're just using their room in way. And here's what I want people to understand that I think gets away from some of you guys sometimes is that I have to be very careful about how all of this shapes up, right? Because these vendors are coming out there and it's not really a great thing to ask some vendors, hey, can you give me this so I can poo-poo all over you, right? That's a big ask. So a lot of times what we've done is I've gone out and I've bought a lot of this equipment and I've sold it. I mean, I have some equipment left. So if anybody's needing some stuff, check out hometheatersavants.com. There's a sales section. But for things like what Jonathan brought up with the subwoofers, I mean, that's not bad. That doesn't reflect poorly on them at all. It's just showcasing what the experience is like and figuring out, do you need to get to this level? So for things like that, like we could lean on Barco or Christie to showcase what different lumen output is like. Like this is this at this brightness. This is this at this brightness. Jonathan saw the Experience Center at like 700 nits a few weeks ago. And he was like, "I'm outside."
Looked like we were standing in headlights in front
Well,
of the
you
car.
could just look next to you, and it was like the guy was on your front porch, not in a
in the
theater.
midday sun.
But stuff like that we could absolutely do. The TV stuff. One thing I'm trying to do is get a TV comparison and a projector comparison big time, like industry big time at Mwave.
What do you mean? Elaborate on that.
Well, that's probably as far as I'll elaborate right now, but it's above the level that we've done historically, right? With industry pros. Not
I think it could be kind of
consumers.
fun because I see a lot of talk on it with the forums. With the new models coming out for 2024 late and 2025 on projectors, this seems like another price uptick among the Epsons for sure. And so there's people saying, I'm done with projectors. I'm moving to big screen TVs. It could be kind of fun to take like a high-end projector and put it against a high-end TV in a room that's blacked out, that's very dark. So you take that NZ900, for instance, and you have a 160-inch screen, and then you bring in an LG G2 or G3 or G4, whatever we can get our hands on, OLED, and it's 97 inches or 85 inches or whatever you can get your hands on, and you let people compare. Like, okay, this is OLED's looks better inch for inch, but when you get that big size, is it worth the trade-off? And let people see that, because I think there's some like die-in-the-wool, I prefer this one, but they probably haven't seen top-end, top-flight equipment from either side, you know, that's kind of in the same ballpark. Because an OLED that size is $25,000 and the JVC is $25,000. And it'd be kind of curious to see that side by side even.
That's something we could do.
And I don't think that neither JVC or LG would be terribly upset with that, because my camera just made a weird sound. Because like that's not, they're in different markets, right? They're just kind of showcasing what they can do. What happened?
Different strokes for different folks. I mean, you're not really in the market for. You would have a much larger screen on a projector and much smaller for the for the TV. Yeah, that would be interesting. I might have to do that. And the projector comparison may come back next year, bigger, back to its big way, because you've got Epson bringing out their stuff, supposedly.
Yeah.
You've got the JVC NZ series. You've got rumor mill coming around with Sony. So next year may be the year we go back to that. And then
maybe even a BenQ if we can get one, because you hear a lot of people talking about how BenQ's got the best sharpness with its
maybe
DLP
we
for
do
its consumer side.
maybe we do. Well, how much is the BenQ?
I don't think they're very much, 3,000 or 4,000.
Well,
I mean, comparatively.
What if you did actual entry level,
Sure.
like 3,000 and under?
You won't even catch anything with that anymore, because the new entry Epson is $8,000.
No.
The 1,000 is
The
8,000.
LS12,000 staying.
Yes.
It's not going away.
Well, I thought you were talking about new models.
No,
okay.
No. So I'm saying just in general, like everything that exists right now, and going down. That may be interesting. That would be what, an Epson 5050, 5040?
The 5050 is supposed to be staying around for now. I don't know if it'll still be around next summer or not, as far as an option to buy. The LS12000 is staying on board. I've heard that they have no intent to take that away.
Mm-mm.
And I think there's some rumor. EU this year goes into effect where they can't sell bulbs anymore. So that's going to change the landscape a little bit for some of the players that have bulbs. They have that rule that they're trying to be more efficient and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Here to Learn says UST projectors, so ultra short throws. Those are tough.
They take a long time to set up the screens and stuff.
Well, not only that, but you can't share the screen because I can't move the projector. Once it's set up, I don't want to have to dial it in every time. So you'd have to have a screen for every projector. So that it gets a little more of a bigger ask.
To his question, though, the last couple of years, there have been USTs there. There's been the Epson 500 and the Epson 800, for instance. I think, if not another one, were those the only two? Those are the two I remember.
Mm-hmm.
SVS had both of those in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there was any of the other brands.
And then Brandy says, could do the TV and projector head-to-head comparison in the same room with a drop-down screen. You could, but what I'd like to do is put a petition between them, and then you could stand at the petition and see both.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we talk about so often, our auditory and visual memories are so short that if you have it on a screen, it gets really difficult, right? Because the screen's going to make it a lot harder to do. I guess you could only drop the screen half. Well, then the projector's going to be, the TV and the projector are going to be fighting each other with the light output. Darwin says gaming projectors. What is a gaming projector?
I wish.
Like
there are them. Like the Acer Predator is an example. It has variable refresh rate. It has 240 hertz. It's DLP. The contrast is terrible. They use those DLPs typically for that, for those gaming projectors, and the contrast is like 1,000 to 1, 800 to 1, 1,500 to 1 at most. Type not like that's too low for gaming. I think, in my opinion,
that's pretty low. And then you've got, like, if you bring in the Optimas, what we've seen from the Optimas is they're their own.
They have a flashlight with a fan vent that shoots out on the screen.
I mean, it makes it easy to find things that you drop on the floor.
We've concluded that those Optimas do that so that they hurt the competition. Because if you got two of them lined up side by side, that little light is not going to hurt a bad contrast ratio to begin with, but it's going to hurt a good contrast ratio. So they don't. That's the logic.
Akama Kiri asks, I'd love to see one of these 100 plus TVs in a fully darkened room to see if they really are viable alternatives to projectors. I think they're okay. There's a lot of blooming and stuff that comes on with them. I mean, it's a cheap TV that's enormous. Now, the LG,
one of the OLEDs.
The OLEDs, those are amazing. Those are amazing. MW says, I went to a trade show last week and LED walls are getting much cheaper. I was quoted $80K for 150 inches. So the problem that I have with LED walls is they're cool, but I got two problems. One, they generate a lot of heat. I mean, a lot of heat. And two, you're married to it. How do you get rid of it? The whole front wall is effectively built for an LED wall. How do you change it? You're kind of stuck with it. How do you change a 115-inch TV? It's kind of disposable. You're not really going to ship it to somebody else. Whereas a projector, with us being enthusiasts, you can take it down, you can put it in the box, you can ship it. Even the Griffin. I can ship it. Can't really ship a 100-inch TV. I mean, I could. It would just be a bad idea. Just be a bad idea.
I don't think you can ship that, Griffith. That
I
thing
mean,
is
freight. It came to me on freight. I mean,
things
if I
that
use
baby hippo would be smaller than that, Griffith.
it's pretty big. It's pretty big. Chinese brand was half that price, where US brand was 4 times the price. Yes. I don't really have a comment for that.
Let's see which one works in 10 years. That's my
Yeah.
concern with that. If you care, maybe you don't care to keep it that long. That's fair,
Kramer
too.
brings up an interesting point. Do LED walls rattle when the bass hits? I don't think most people or most vendors are testing at the bass frequencies that we're getting to. So that would be interesting. A bass frequency constantly knocking the panels out of alignment. So all of your panels are like this.
Hanging off the wall. God.
Hey, Mom, watch this. As the bass comes down.
Oh, that's funny.
Anything else you'd like to add to that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be interest in some of the KC guys helping out and stuff to make this work. But if you're doing more of the comparisons, are you going to try to figure out comparisons that vendors would be willing to do, that
some of them
that wouldn't be necessarily competition between vendors? Is that kind of more where your headspace is at?
For those, like what got brought up with, if we cut or curtain off 20 hertz and below, what does that sound like? If we cut or curtain off, I don't know, 15,000 hertz and above, how many people can actually hear that?
Not
or
very
just
many
do a hearing test
of our age.
Like, what does that actually do for you? I think that would be eye-opening for a lot of people. Just doing a simple hearing test at some of these frequencies would be very interesting for people. But yeah, I think some of them, like speaker comparisons, cable comparison, if we did amps, pro versus a residential amp.
I think that kind of stuff's real fun.
That is fun. It just takes more setup time. I was, if I did that, I was thinking about doing a track moving system instead of the Lazy Susan that we did a couple years ago. And maybe automating it, but that's because I'm a masochist and I like punishing myself with trying to figure this stuff out. But those things are always fun. They just take a lot of planning, and it's a little more expensive because I don't like asking the vendors, like, hey, do you want your speaker to be in a comparison? Because they may lose. It may not. And the other problem is what if I set something up poorly? Well, now I'm directly reflecting onto them with something that they trusted me with. So buying stuff and then taking the time to make sure that I do my best to set it up is very important. But that's the idea. Yeah. If the KC Cruise opened anything, happy to facilitate.
I'm glad to hear that your head's still thinking that you'd like to continue this, because I mean, just to be fully transparent, at Mwave, people would walk up to me and say, I'm really happy you're doing this show. And I would always tell them, like, this isn't me. This is Ryan and Michael together. This is their creation. And I'm just kind of like a tag along that was an enthusiast here from Kansas City. Our Kansas City group has been doing these kind of things internally since like 2009, 2010, 2011 timeframe, regularly, like quite a few different shootouts. And then this was Michael and Ryan's idea. I'm not even sure which one of you started this, but their idea to kind of bring this to a broader community and make a show out of it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear it's continuing, is the bottom line of what I'm trying to say.
Me too. Now I've just got to figure out a date.
My wife was saying, why in the summer? Is it possible to bring it to like a fall or spring so it's not so hot? That's
probably the direction I'm going to go, is the fall or the spring. The nice thing about this, I mean, maybe it doesn't really matter with kids and things like that. I don't think it necessarily matters. The summer, it was just where we ended up, I think, because of the time frame where we were the first year, and then it just stuck there. But the fall, the only problem with fall is Cedia kind of gets in the way of some of that. Maybe spring is a better time. Not entirely sure, but yeah, maybe. We're starting to plan. When I go to CEDIA, I'm gonna talk to some of the contacts that I think would be very helpful in doing something like this. Industry professionals that are very objective and want to see the direction that we're trying to push it with objectivity and science. So hopefully after CEDIA, we leave for CEDIA next Sunday, so a week from today, and then I'm there for a week, and then I come home. Hopefully we'll have some progress after that. I know there's a lot of vendors that want to be involved. We're just in the planning stages right now because I got to make sure that I've got some assistance with doing this and that the financials line up, because I at least want to break even or I will be divorced. So that's an important factor. Anything else before I change topics and go on a little bit of a rant again before we get to the question?
HDMI is still a bee in your bonnet.
This isn't about HDMI. This will be about social media. Anything else?
No, but yeah, let's talk more.
We'll talk more. Scenes. Yeah, you and I will talk more. So, next topic. I have noticed, and this particularly comes up with the most often with two different vendors, Kaleidoscape and MadVR. And a lot of times this comes up, people say, well, I can build my own. And while, yes, you could probably build your own NAS, and yes, you could probably build your own home theater PC to run the free version of MadVR, that's not the point. The point is, especially with a NAS, where are you going to get all the content? Now you have to take your time to rip all the content. Where do you think companies that sell all this stuff, like Kaleidoscape, when they're getting things directly from the studios, licensing, labor, salaries, R&D, shipping, right? I think a lot of people forget that these companies are people. It's not like they can just buy parts from Best Buy and Micro Center, put them in a box and be like, here you go. I mean, they got to make money at doing this. And I think people forget that a company has to make enough money to continue operation. That's the whole point of business. Business is just a construct that we made up in order to facilitate this whole thing and create relationships and do things with each other, like sell things. I mean, that's all this is. So I think people forget that it's not just the hardware that you see in front of you. Like, yeah, I could go build a computer and do all of this stuff, but then to take that to another level, why don't you go build your own hard drive? I mean, you could, theoretically. You could get all the parts and you could solder and you could have a microscope to do all. You could do that and you could save money, but you're paying a company to do it for you. And I bet people would be shocked to know how much margin is in that stuff. In any of this stuff. And every step that it goes through, every step, there is a markup. Every single step that it goes through, every person that it touches outside of the initial platform, it goes up in price. Everybody has to have their share. And the same thing is happening with all of these products that you're saying you're going to build another product out of. And it just makes no sense to me that people are always crapping on other people's parades. And it's really weird, right? When somebody else buys something that they're really excited about, and then everybody else, some of the people come out in the comments, especially on Facebook, and they're like, well, I could build that, and they're just trying to rip people off. Like, guys, then, I don't know. If you don't, it's like my mom. I feel like I'm my mom. If you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say it. Like, man, some people are just interesting. I might as well quit trying to use logic. Yeah, maybe. It's like arguing with a wall. But
I think there's a little bit of sour grapes type stuff that goes on with that, Ryan.
You think so?
I do, actually, because a lot of people that say that if they were given something that was a price that they felt comfortable to afford, I'm not even going to say could afford, because people can probably afford things if they wanted to set their mind to it. But something they felt more comfortable spending the money on, they'd probably take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Like, I am not a Kaleidoscape customer because I don't want to spend $5,000 on my thing. But I would love it if it was like a cheaper price. Can't fault them for having a cheaper price. But if I had a more vocal opinion on it, I might go out and spread hate and so forth against Kaleidoscape. And I don't. But I mean, I think that's kind of where that more comes from, because like, why would I just feel like you can kind of read between the lines and come up to that estimation. That's my opinion on it.
Well, here's a perfect example of this. Chad AV, I'm picking on you. Kscape is overpriced. There's no getting around that. I don't know why you'd spend $100,000 for Kscape when you could hire a guy to make it set up for 1K. Where are you getting that math?
100K.
There is a version, the 123 terabyte, that I think is like $60,000 or something like that. It's SSDs. I know it's overpriced. It is what it is. But when you get into the nitty gritty of all of this, it's all overpriced. There's always a markup. It doesn't matter. And for your 1K, let's take your 1K, because you're probably getting close at that point in comparing a 1K NAS for $1,000 and an 8 terabyte Kaleidoscape. Okay, so let's say you've 8 terabytes to 8 terabytes. How are you getting the content? How are you going to do that? You going to do it illegally here in the United States? You going to rip that content? Theoretically, you own it so you can make a copy. But are you going to do that? You're going to go buy the movies, find them online, have them shipped to you. You're going to rip it. Do you know how to rip it? Is the next thing, because ripping a UHD is not like it was ripping a DVD. So
yeah, but
now,
even still, I don't think you have to drum up how difficult it is, because it's really not.
Well, it's not that I'm saying
it's a convenience thing, no matter what.
My main point was going to be time. That was my main point.
Sure.
Is that it all takes time. So what I use and why I value Kaleidoscape, I had an 80 terabyte NAS. I did it all myself. I had a lot of content. My family liked it. But the problem was I was my own IT. And when things didn't work, like if Plex updated, a driver updated, and then everything stopped working, now I have to go fix it. With something like Kaleidoscape, most of the time it just works. I don't have to worry about it. I've never actually had it fail. It's not most of the time, it's all the time. And then I can just go on the store, buy what I want, and then it's there in 10 minutes. I don't have to worry about anything. So for me, and the pitch that I give to my customers, because I'm a dealer, is it's convenience. It's not the pitch that I think Kaleidoscape gets themselves in trouble with of it's better. If you compare it to a physical piece of media, I don't think you're going to see the difference. You might on some content. There is some content on there where it got a 1080p release and it only got a DVD release in the physical world, or there's some that got a 4K release and it only ever got a 1080p release or a Blu-ray release. So there are some, and then if you look at the size of content on certain movies, there is larger files than what you get on a physical release because they're not constrained by the size, the platter for the disc. But I don't know that you would ever notice that. So I think they get themselves into trouble using that comparison. Go ahead.
Just one of the comments here talking about, look at Mike Stevens' comment. Do you have ability to pop that up on screen?
Mm-hmm. Kscape would probably have fewer haters if the storage was cheaper or not proprietary, but they have to make their profit somewhere and think they have spread that across the product line. So one of the issues that you run into with that, in my opinion, is a lot of people that buy it, there's not really much to upgrade to. A lot of those systems are still in use, and it's not like you're constantly upgrading. So they have to catch all of that profit in one initial sale. And they don't make really much at all from the content that's being sold. That's all controlled. The content prices and stuff are controlled by the studios. So they don't make a lot of profit on that side. So when you think about, they don't have a constant stream of income from singular buyers, and they have to make all of that in one particular sale. So they could make it cheaper, but they've got to make the money in some way. But it may not be that they're saying that it's the storage. I mean, it could be licensing. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But there has to be a profit stream or the company can't exist. If you're going to rip and be able to resell it, you'll get sued within hours of publicly announcing that. Yeah, but we're not reselling it. So is it technically illegal to rip?
No, I think there was that lawsuit that went through, and they said like a personal copy or something is allowed. I believe is the way it fell out. But you can't share it. Obviously, you can't download it. You can't put it on the internet. You can't do anything like that. Like if you own the physical disc, I think you're allowed to make a personal backup copy by law. That's the last time I've
I
looked
guess
into
that's
it.
true. But then my thing comes down to how much is your time worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to some people, it's worth it. To others, it's not. I have yet to find somebody that has bought a K-Scape from me and says, I regret buying this.
Sure.
So it's not for everybody. I just wish people would accept that. Like, if you don't like it, don't buy it. It's not a big deal. I don't know why people come out of the woodwork and be like, I'm going to tell you why your buying decision is wrong, even though you love it. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Should we answer questions?
I have a soapbox from the other side, and I won't dig that deep into it.
Have
but
at it.
I've noticed on ABS forum there seems to be more and more elitism. It seems like, at least to me, as the years go on. Like I've been on that forum for 20 years at this point, and there's always been a taste of it, right? But I think as kind of some of the budget gear has gotten into higher price brackets, it brings in kind of the snobbish, elitist folk that if you don't have what they have, your stuff is trash. And this happens even with what I would deem like higher end gear, like it's still trash. And it's I actually feel like almost like in the last few weeks, I've been watching this Epson release, the announcement of the new models, pretty keenly because I like Epson products, like actually like them, like not just because they're a good value, but I like them. I really appreciate them. And I there's like people coming into the Epson. There's Epson threads talking about the new models that are coming out, the 3 new models, and the hype and stuff behind it, and trying to get specs on it and get a bead on it early and all that kind of stuff. There are many people that come into those Epson threads that are like, JVC is the only answer. JVC buy new, and if you can't afford that, buy used. This Epson's trash. All that kind of stuff. Like just like repeatedly popping in there and saying stuff like that. I've started reporting them because it's getting old. It's agitating, and it keeps happening. Like, okay, so you prefer your Epson, or you prefer your JVC? That's fine. Like, why are you in the other person's thread talking about? Why are you in the other person's thread just like troll to go in there and cause trouble and talk about how much better your product is?
I would be interested to know how many of those trolls actually have JVC projectors.
Based on what I see, they do. But on Facebook, I actually think Facebook is probably worse because on some of the Facebook threads, people are in there basically saying that you're a complete fool. That people who haven't even seen the Epson, for instance, people who haven't even seen the Epson coming in saying that like you're a complete fool if you like this. Why would anyone buy that over a JVC? You can buy a used JVC for X, Y, and Z. As if there's not any kind of counterpoints in the world of any kind of display device where maybe someone prefers motion or interesting contrast or gaming like functions or a smoother screen that doesn't have PWM. Those are some of the reasons I prefer Epson. So yes, JVC rules the roost when it comes to dim, dark pictures and has better HDR tone mapping. No question.
Yeah.
But that's not like those are the clean sweep, and Epson has nothing on JVC. Epson has its own counterpoints, which I just rattled off some of them. To say that there is only a one-way street and anyone who buys like an Epson and come into the Epson threads to do it and talk about how you're an idiot or a fool for buying it is just, it's just so aggravating that I want to take a little vacation from the forum. And it's just like so prevalent, man. It's so prevalent. It's like, you can't get out of it. Pages and pages of off-topic stuff like that. And you reported the mods and nothing happens. And it's just frustrating. So that's my rant. Like, I wish that was not that way. Stay in your lane.
I think social media has a big part of that. And I think part of it is a lot of times people find themselves in echo chambers where it reverberates around what they think and they're surrounded. And then social media constantly pushes them edge cases that are contentious. That's probably not the right word, but that get people fired up so they want to engage more and go do stuff. So I think unfortunately on AVS, I noticed this on overclocking forums that you see it on Reddit all the time. A lot of people, and this is why I brought up about how many people own those JVCs, is it's just they're parroting things that they heard in some cases. And I would be interested to see how many of those people have actually done objective A/B comparisons like we have.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I think a big part of the reason that we have the sides that we do is because, I mean, look at the direction that I went. I have a 3-chip DLP that doesn't have that level of contrast at all anymore. Without a modified lens, the Griffin is 5,001 native contrast, but its ANSI is encroaching on 1,000. I mean, would you say that picture was bad? It was a terrible lens.
No, and it's color calibrated, but it's a fantastic bright image, like fun in its own right.
And the lens is like, it's not even aligned properly. Its focus uniformity is awful. Its pixel alignment is terrible right now. But it's, granted, I'm comparing, like we're on a completely different price spectrum here, but people forget that native contrast isn't everything. And they have a tendency to jump all down this one rabbit hole. It's the same thing that happened with audio in Synad. I mean, I see Synad in distortions and stuff. Well, it has audio science review, and Amir in it, he does great things. But I think a lot of people that jump in there, they're chasing things. Jonathan, you bring this up all the time, that they can't hear.
Yeah.
So why are you doing this? Like, what are you doing? Why does this matter?
Knocking down, that's one of my gripes against Amir. Knocking down a review score because it has like a 10 dB less Synad score that's still 10 dB above what human threshold of hearing is. So like I saw like, and I like what Amir does. He's done a lot for the hobby. So this isn't a full attack on him. But when I saw him like review the Denon 3800 and knock it down a score because at 86, if I remember right, Synad, saying that wasn't as good as the previous Denons. Like the 3700 had a better score than the 3800, and he said that I'm going to knock this down a score. 86 Synad is 10 dB higher than what anybody will say that you can hear. So like, and when he reported to Denon basically said, so we can't hear it. Why do we care? And he kind of took that as kind of frustration. Like, well, you lost ground from what your 3700 was to the 3800, but it's all still in the threshold of inaudible. Like it's not even close to the threshold of audible. 10 dB is doubling, so it's like double what you would need to hear as far as the noise threshold. So it's, I don't know, that kind of stuff spawns its own elitism, and it's okay that we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's okay to buy something that's engineered to a degree that you can't hear. If that's what you want, engineering perfection, and you're chasing that, and you like that, and it makes you excited and happy to see the hobby progress, by all means. But there needs to be a honest, candid conversation to say, here's what humans hear, here's that threshold. And here's where this product is. And sometimes those lines are not delineated clearly.
And I don't think it's I don't think it's Amir's fault. My point is that people jump onto those reviews and then they will talk poorly about something because of one granular thing, like one variable. And that's the same thing that ends up happening in a lot of these threads with, you look at when it's compared to JVC. And I'm not saying JVC is bad. I'm saying that people will always jump on and say, well, its native contrast isn't good. That comes up all the time. And it seems like on AVS, that's the only thing that people care about in a projector is native contrast. But they don't think about any other of the important things. So we're kind of coming back to Mwave. This is something that I wanted Jason Dustle to talk about at Mwave, and I wanted to do a video about it with him in the Mad VR Experience Center, is talking and educating people on what are all of these video settings in a display? What do they all mean? Because I think people parrot a lot of this and they don't know what any of it actually is. Like they'll look at native contrast. What is it? Like I don't think they actually know, aside from, well, it gets blacker. And ANSI contrast, I don't think they know what that is at all, because most people don't even bring it up. So I think it's important, and this is something that I've talked to industry guys about. I think this year, or probably next year with Mwave, is I want to go back to more of a foundational thing and start at the very bottom. Because I think it's important that we build the foundation so that people have a better basis for understanding everything that's coming after it. Like first thing we talk about is everybody goes in, we talk about, this is what all of these things are.
Mm-hmm.
video and audio. And then you do the comparisons, and now you've got everybody's on the same baseline now,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really important. And I think that's a big issue with what we're seeing on the forums and social media is it's given people a platform to think that their opinion matters. And our opinions don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
People need to understand that it's just an opinion. Like yours is no more valid than anybody else's. So people use it as a soapbox to preach, and unfortunately, the anonymity gives people the ability to talk poorly about others, which is sad. Because I bet, Jonathan, if you put all those people that are in that Epson thread in a room together, face to face, they wouldn't be that negative.
I agree in full. You can have preferences in conversation. Many do when we go to these shootouts and so forth. But I've never heard anything break out in like these personal attacks or fights that you kind of see on the forums or Facebook. It just doesn't happen. You might say, I think this is a little bit better, and here's why. Instead of like, you're an idiot, you're a fool if you think that, like, what's wrong with you? I have all this experience, I don't know. It's kind of blows
really
my mind.
Yeah, it does blow my mind. It is interesting, but you and I will continue to talk about that. We should do some questions. There's not very many. People have been arguing, which is good. I like people arguing. They've been cordially arguing, which is important. There's only 7 questions, which is nice, I think. First one is Mosin asks, I was using an HD Fury Vroom to get Dolby Vision via LLDV when using PS5. Picture disconnected for a
It's not popping up there, Ryan, if you're trying to put it on the
sorry.
screen.
Let's do that. Picture disconnected for a few seconds. It happens a couple times. They inform me this is due to a short 1 meter HDMI cable. Your opinion.
Don't get him started on HDMI again, fellas. Come on now.
So it could be the 1 meter HDMI cable. And the reason that is, and this is why people bring up the topic of, well, all HDMI cables are the same. They're not. A functioning HDMI cable that works correctly will do nothing better than anything else. But ones that are not functioning correctly will do, and this includes source devices and receiving devices. It's not just the cable. So if it's functioning correctly, theoretically everything should work, and there's no difference. So don't get me wrong here by saying there's magic and it's going to make everything better. That's not what I mean. What I mean by this is there is a difference in how crappily things can be. And in this case, what can happen when the cable is too short is the signal can get to the source too hot, or not the source, the destination too hot, and it can't deal with it. And therefore it goes, and you lose handshake, and it goes black. And then it tries again. And in some cases, you can burn out the input, depending on the voltage. So try and lengthen your cable. That may work.
So hold up a second. You had a customer that had an LS12000, and you mentioned that they were having some issues with HDMI cables. And there was a setting in the manual when I was looking through it that has EQ levels, which is exactly what you're talking about. For short cables, use this. For medium length cables, use this. For long cable installs, use this. Did that happen to help your customer, or was it a bad cable, or where did that one end up?
That got RMA'd. Yeah, that wasn't a cable problem.
In regards to this gentleman here, he doesn't say what his display is. Probably a TV, since he's
talking about Dolby Vision. He's talking about Dolby Vision.
But he's using HDR to get Dolby Vision output, so that might not be a TV. At any rate, there might be a setting like that on your display device. I don't know if there is, but there was on the LS12000 where you can set the HDMI EQ level, is what they actually called it, to different lengths of cable is effectively the purpose, to get that voltage matching that Ryan's talking about.
There's a lot more intricacies to a lot of this stuff, guys, than you think there is. And I really wish the industry talked about it more, but frankly, I think a lot of the vendors don't understand it either. So there's a lot of things that I wish were more regulated, and they're not. Some vendors do a very good job. A lot of the bigger vendors do a very good job. There are some issues that do come up, but things do, for the most part, work out very well. But I do want people to understand that not all HDMI cables are made the same. And if one works, even if it's the same manufacturer and the same model and the same everything, it doesn't necessarily mean that the next one's going to work. So there's a lot. It's really annoying. But it is what it is. So Richard asks, this is a pull on to this. is there directional HDMI cables? Passive ones, no. Active ones, yes. And that the only reason they're directional is because of the sending and receiving heads for how they have to convert the incoming digital signal and send it over fiber via light. So they're converting it from electricity into light and then sending it out, and then it's getting converted back into digital. Well, it's still technically digital, but electrical signal to come in via HDMI on the receiving end. And if they're backwards, they just won't work.
There's a super chat that just came in from Chris Stowell.
There's a couple super chats that I need to get to. Hold on. There were two. Where are they?
And then if you can favorite that one from Home Theater Denmark that just came
There
in.
it is. Hold on. I got to do this one first. Chris Stovall asks, Monolith 365 seems like one of the best options for reference-capable neutral speakers with in-wall option for $500. Any other option to consider?
I've never even heard that. Have you heard that yet?
The Monolith 365. Yeah, a lot of people. This is a heavily recommended one.
No, I mean in person. I haven't heard it in person. I've heard people talk about it, but not heard it in person yet.
No.
Looks like there's a lot of threads on AVS forum where people are shaking sticks at it.
Yeah. I think this is one that people end up parroting, and they don't. I think that's danger. The danger of AVS is people will talk like they're experts. The first thing that jumps out here is a Silk Dome tweeter. The second thing is its sensitivity that they say is 89.5. And the third thing is a rated frequency response of 35 hertz.
The last one doesn't bother me so much, but the Silk Soft Dome tweeter probably means that it's not going to be reference capable unless you're in a very small room or sit very close to it. So
it says, and then they don't give a maximum power handling. They give you a recommended amplifier power. So that, I don't like it when companies do that because it comes across as I'm trying to hide something.
We think a lot of the Monolith line in general. We talked to Hobie from the Monoprice with Youthman's show back in the day. He's an enthusiast just like Ryan and I, trying to make the best product he can. He gets some leeway with his company Monoprice to like go outside of the bounds a little bit of like the cheapest way to make things and make it a quality thing that he would be happy to own as an enthusiast. That's kind of his motto. So I'm sure it's a good speaker. If you care about reference capable, I'm going to stand my guns and say it probably won't do that. And some people don't care about that, and that's fine. But just that might be something to consider.
The THX nomenclature to me, when it comes to speakers, means nothing.
Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate they've watered down their cert like that.
I mean, they say like dominance, it means something, but they won't tell you what it means. Like what? It's just marketing at that point. So Chris Stovall brings in another super chat. Follow up on the super chat. Monolith 365 doesn't have an in-ceiling option, but does have an in-wall. Should I use those for height speakers or consider other options?
How big's your room, Chris?
Yeah.
And how loud do you like to listen? Do you want like retail premium cinema experience? Like that's basically THX reference volume. If you go to like your Dolby Cinema or if you go to a nice IMAX, that type of thing is, if you want that kind of volume, these speakers probably won't do it unless you're in like a small bedroom that's been converted to a home theater. And I say that pretty confidently, given the sensitivity thing and the size of the tweeter.
Say that again. What you just said? I didn't.
Oh, I was just saying that I asked him what size this room was, 15 foot by 13 foot. So it's not a huge room. In walls, though, mean that he's not getting any extra distance from against the wall to himself. The next question is how loud do you like to listen, Chris? Or do you want like premium commercial cinema level? Do you want Dolby Cinema volume levels, or is that too loud for you? Like when you go to the movie theater, do you like it that loud, or do you think it's too loud?
Yeah,
because that's where that's going to kind of be a little different.
So, Chris, here's what I would do, and this is just to try and get you taken care of. In the description of this video is the email address to get a hold of me. Send me an email, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I am not going to try and sell you something. Even if you don't want to buy from me, I want to try and make your experience in the AV space as good as it can. So I think we should have a chat about what you're trying to do, what your end goal is, and see if we can give you, and maybe the monolith is the best option for what you're looking at. I don't know. I've just, given its specification, I'm always leery of a soft dome tweeter.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Especially when they say that I'm reference capable, and yeah, maybe at like 1 inch.
Chris, I did a review of the Arndal
You did.
1723s on my channel, and they're THX certified, and they have a 1-inch soft dome tweeter. I don't know if obviously it's not the same tweeter, but it's going to be similar capabilities. Watch that review and watch what happens if you try to keep any kind of sustained dynamics at THX reference. The top end above like 10 or 12 hertz just falls hard and falls down to like 85, 90 dB. So reference is calling for 105 dB. And if those soft dome tweeters as an individual one not only can they not create that peak ever, but if you're trying to have sustained like gunshots, it's not going to keep it even close.
Well,
You're going to be
distorting too.
You're going to be like 10 or 12 dB down. And how that reveals itself could be distortion, or it could just be that you don't get the clean dynamics. And we've talked about that in the podcast here too before, where like the first time I was exposed to pro speakers 10 or 15 years ago with home cinema tracks in a home cinema, I was like, I had all Wharfdale speakers, like all Wharfdales around. And I was thinking, my speakers have never been able to do this. No matter how loud I do it, they cannot make that glass shatter sound that sounds realistic, like the giant War of the Worlds sound where the big foot came down and smashed the car and glass shattered us all over the place. That was quiet on my Wharfdales because I had a 1-inch soft dome and they couldn't do it. They just couldn't create the dynamics there. Or the chain that fell down the well in the Lord of the Rings.
That is way louder than
in the Well of Mordor. When you get a very dynamic speaker that has plenty of headroom over reference, those chain links falling down there are like, wow, that's loud. No wonder it woke up the orcs instead of just like, well, why did the orcs wake up from that? It's a totally different experience.
Compression.
And so we want to make sure you're aware of that. You can make your own choice. If you listen like 10 dB under reference, if your answer was I only listen 10 dB under reference, this would not be an issue at all. I would say go for it. But you did say 5 dB to reference is your preference.
Yep. He said 5 dB below reference is average listening.
Mm-hmm.
So I would surely encourage you, not a soft dome. Okay. Great discussion so far. That one's done. Jonathan, have you considered getting a Kaleidoscape Strato V? Why or why not?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that earlier in the podcast. I would like one, but I think my financial sensibility is that I don't want to spend $5,000 on a streamer.
$5.
So I'm out. I like them. I've seen them in multiple homes. I like them. They're a good product. But we all have our own thresholds of what we think is okay, and based on whatever, just our frugality or our income or whatever else, and that one's outside of my league, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Christy Griffin, Barco, Sony. You've seen them all.
So I've seen the Griffin at your house, right?
Uh-huh.
Is the Barco I saw at Mwave, several of them, but I don't even know which ones we saw, right? Which one's the 100,000-ish type range Barco?
That's the Nord.
And the GT's 380. Surprisingly, I don't think I've ever seen the GTZ 380 like in a dark room for show. They had it at Mwave 2022. Mm-hmm. It was like out in a bright area. Plenty bright, but not really critical viewing room bright, right? I mean, we weren't in a critical viewing room. I can't answer this, Ryan. You answer it if you want. They all have their own little idiosyncrasies, I think. And my eyes aren't compatible with any of them long term. The way Jonathan sees is not compatible with these projectors because they have PWM flashing. All three of those do. And it is tiresome to me personally. And that PWM doesn't affect very many people. It's between 5 and 15%, depending on what you read, that get affected by it. It basically, these things control their brightness by a flashing between a bright scene and a black scene. So in the simplest format, without going into the technology more specifically, if you wanted 80% brightness, you would have 4 bright scenes and 1 dark scene in the same timestamp. So it's like it's a pulsing of light. Instead of like an analog, hey, we're just going to dial the voltage down 80% and the light will be steady and just hover at 80% the whole time. It's 4 bright scenes and 1 black scene. And if you record it in slow motion, you'll see it. And that bothers some people's eyes, unlucky people, and I'm one of the unlucky one. And all 3 of those do that. And so not for me. So Ryan, your choice.
They're all good in their own way. I personally prefer the Griffin. It has the ability to have Alan modify the lens. I think can take the native contrast to, depending on how far you want the modification, go up to 15 or 16,000 to 1. Now you do sacrifice light in doing that. But the Griffin is also much more capable for the price point. So let's say they're all 100,000. They vary slightly. But let's say they're all $100,000 with lenses. The Barco, the Nord, is 10 to 12,000. The GTZ 380 is 10 to 12,000. The Griffin, unmodified, is 35,000 lumens. So it's just on a different playing field than the other ones for the price point. And it's a commercial level projector. It's liquid cooled like the other ones are. They all run on 240. If I had to pick, I would go Griffin. No question.
Do you think most people in most rooms, in most situations, would be better served with like a NZ900? If they're not, I mean, think about the difference in price as you answer that too. 25,000 versus 100,000.
Depends on the screen size. I mean, you could drop to like an M4K15, but it's again all dependent on the screen size. So if you're like 150 inches or so, probably, but it depends on how far you want to chase the rabbit on the brightness. I mean, once you've tasted 300 nits, it's difficult to come back down. And 150 inches on an NZ900, it's just not going to happen. So there's other options. It'll be really interesting to see what Epson does with that top model that's 10,000 lumens that's been leaked. So I'm very anxious to see that one at CEDIA. So we'll see. We will see. But out of those 3, probably the Griffin. And if you want to talk more about that Sasakanth, reach out. Send me an email. Making sure we're not missing anything on questions. No. Okay. So we did that one. Arad took the Casescape dive this week. A bit disappointed that not all movies are truly done with director's intent from the studios. Interstellar doesn't have VAR, nor do others that should. Why? That was a studio thing. So the studios are the ones that push the content. That's not up to Kscape. The studios do all the pricing. They do all the content pushing for what particular version of the content is pushed. I don't have a good answer for that. That's what they decided to push. I wish they would have the variable aspect ratio, but they didn't, and I don't know why they did that. Anything to add to that, Jonathan? No?
Not on that one.
Okay. So what does the new room sound like? Is it much better than the old one? Is it way better? Was it just okay? Was it worth the money? Guy, I assume you're talking about the Mad VR Experience Center. I have no regrets. It does not suck.
It sounds better than the old one.
Yes.
I will attest.
Yes. I think to me, it's the best sounding room I've ever been in, and we haven't gone through the end calibration yet. So it's no regrets. I got nothing. Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fantastic. And when it's all dialed in and shored up, I'm sure it'll just be one step better too.
It'd be nice to not hear the projector because it's not quiet. I mean, 40 dB. Jonathan, I'm going to let you take this one because I think you're more in tune with what people would want out of Mwave. What were some of the biggest things attendees were saying they wanted better?
So we heard some talk, and I think that's where Ryan's head was at on some of his replies here. That they they liked the vendors. They liked and I liked the vendors. I like seeing some of the best that home theater can do. You know, 4 of the rooms there were just over the top and expensive rooms that most enthusiasts will never ever ever get to witness outside of a show like that, and won't witness in most of the bigger shows anyway. Um, so that was fun, but it did change the feel. And I think there was some people saying they didn't want this to be just another vendor show because some of those already exist in some capacity. And so I think that's where Ryan was kind of thinking like, hey, let's come back to kind of the roots a little bit and do some more of the comparisons and the competition between vendors and more. Some of the feedback I heard was like, all right, this is awesome. I've never heard a $200,000 room before. This is awesome, but this is something I will never, ever be able to or choose to afford. And, and probably would prefer to have stuff more in my league. Like, where's the $1,000 speakers? Or where's the $500 speakers? Where's the, $1,000 subs or $500 subs? Those things were missing in this last M-Wave, with the exception of one room, really. The one at the end that your dealer friend kind of
Ascendo?
had run.
No.
The,
Oh,
the,
the Kincaid?
yeah, and they weren't even inexpensive speakers in there. There was a clip set that was not terribly high.
Those were actually
Um,
more expensive than all of the speakers in the Ascendo room. All of the Ascendo, the 10s are 2,300 a piece. Now,
but
that
that's
is
not.
still
But
expensive.
yeah. But I mean, when you're talking about putting together a room with like 7 or 10 or 11, 7 or 11 or 13 speakers,
Yeah.
2,300 a piece is.
The hard part, though, especially at M-Wave, is you got to have a certain amount of headroom and horsepower to be able to fill those rooms. And when a lot of times, if you're coming in at the lower levels, you just don't have the output.
I have half a mind, Ryan, to see what you think about this. Like a Behringer 212 XL, and you might have to think this through with your vendors, or a Mackie C200, or some pro audio speaker that's $200 to $300 a pop. If we got a little setup and made a room out of those to kind of give people a taste of here's what $5,000 total in speakers sounds like, speakers and subs, like the whole thing. An atypical setup like this is, hey, you go to Musician's Friend or Guitar Center, you buy pro audio speakers. They're not the best looking, but they perform well.
How much are they?
Like $200 to $300 a piece. And you buy a plot of those things. You probably sell them at the show, I would think. Somebody would probably want to walk away with that theater after they heard it. That's my opinion. Compare that, like, okay, this theater all in was $5,000 or $6,000. Now you were all in, heard a $100,000 or $200,000 theater. Where's your diminishing turns fall in place? So I'm not talking buy cheap junky speakers. I'm talking about buying pro audio speakers that are kind of entry level pro audio that are capable of THX reference, that won't have the best resonance. They'll have if you do a knock test, it'll sound like a plastic speaker, but it will do reference and it will do it clean. I think that could be an interesting little thing. I don't know if the vendors would cry foul a little bit on that, but it could be interesting.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I'd have to think on that one and what makes the most sense there. Or if there's a way, because this is something that my business partner and I are actually talking about, is making sure that we make the space accessible, because we don't just want to be pushing all the really expensive stuff, because yeah, it's cool and it's sexy like an expensive car, but it's not the common man, and it doesn't check all the boxes for a lot of people. So trying to find something that is both affordable and has really good performance, I think, is of the utmost right now.
And it's not
So
that you don't do it. As I think about this, you had the SVS room. Their room all in, at least in 2023, I think they said was $11,000. I don't remember if I heard how much it was this year, but be in that same ballpark.
Well, I think it was more because they had whatever the new flagships and stuff were in there, and it was a bit more. So I think those speakers are like $5,000 or $6,000 for a pair. But still, I mean, not as expensive as some of the other rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Good thoughts. Did that one come up, or did it just go away? Oh, we already did that one. Okay. Finster. Jonathan, we'll let you take this one again. Should you have a flat frequency response for subs from 10 to 120 hertz, or should it increase as you get lower? Confused lately as everybody talks about getting a flat response for their subs.
So they're talking about the Fletcher-Munson curves, basically,
Yep.
where there's studies saying that, hey, as frequencies go down, our human hearing hears less. So I'm going to elevate the lower frequencies as kind of like a turn up towards the lower frequencies to combat that, to basically make it sound more level in your ears due to the natural roll off. This is going to be personal preference. And if you ask 5 keen enthusiasts that have the possibility of how they run their subs to do however they want, they'll all have different answers. Like, I've had friends that make a ULF curve that just like spikes up like some sort of cliff, and they like it that way. And I personally don't like it that way. So again, it's going to be personal preference. You can arrange it if you want, so that it tries to say, you could do like test tones, like choose a 20 hertz, 19 hertz, 17 hertz, 15 hertz, just go down the list and try to make it to where you're subjectively hearing the same volume as you go down. That's one way to do it. Or if you just want to have a flat frequency response and like let it roll off in a natural way with your own human hearing, that's fine too. Overall, I'm not going to get too excited about that discussion so much as I think it's more fun to talk about how much you want to elevate your subwoofers over the mains. So if you get a reasonably flat frequency response, how much do you like to elevate it? I personally prefer like 9 to 12 dB.
Yeah.
And I've had friends and enthusiasts that like as much as like 20 to 25 dB, and some like only 3 to 6 dB. And so that's kind of where I'm more at.
What I've noticed a lot though with the how much you elevate over the mains is most of the time I have found when people are elevating a lot, there's phasing issues in their subs. So they're compensating for a lack of physical feel with more volume to get that feel back. When as your subs are in phase, like Jonathan, yours are in your room, you have a tendency to lower it. Historically, the first time I did Mwave, I was having phasing problems and my room was really loud because I was using the volume, the SPL, to compensate for that, because we're all chasing the feel. And if you can't get it, you end up compensating to try and access it by increasing the SPL. So I find that the more dialed in your subs are, I've brought how much over my mains are down. And I agree with you that it's subjective for how much you raise. I like starting it flat and then subjectively changing it like you recommended.
Yeah, that's my preference. Make it a reasonably flat frequency response and then elevate it all. Like take the whole subwoofer frequency range and bring it all up.
Yep.
That's my preference.
MW, Ryan, what are you crossing your kick subs at? I have the 12B and slowly moved to 135 crossover, and wow, what a difference. So there's actually not a crossover between my infrasonics and my kicks. They all handle everything. The kicks just roll off earlier, and then the infrasonics just keep going. So what do I have the 12s crossed over at? They're like 110, 120, somewhere in there, where my surrounds cross over with the kick subs, or with all my subs. Because the infrasonics, and this is what a lot of people don't know, even the 50 and the 32 can get to almost 1,000 hertz, something like that, audibly, which not very many subs can do. So yeah, I have a fairly high crossover on the surrounds. My mains are decently low.
Also, one thing to note as you talk about a higher crossover frequency, and we've talked about this on the podcast before too, but it's worth mentioning. If your main speakers are here and your subwoofers are here, and you elevate your subwoofers to here, that crossover point where it comes to the mains moves over.
Yes.
So you might have your receiver calibrated to 135, but when you raise your subs like this, now all of a sudden your true crossover point on the frequency response graph that you plot might be like 180, something like that. You're raising your crossover point by elevating your bass.
Because it's a angled.
Yes.
Doing the same way. They're an angled line, right? So it's not just a straight up and down line. It's a gradual raise, I guess, depending on what crossover you actually use and how many dB per octave you're doing. I mean, if you're doing 48 dB per octave, I mean, it could be vertical, but
right.
You know, most people are doing
with built-in receivers
12
like
or 24,
1 to 12.
Yeah. I think I like 24, but a lot of built-ins are 12, I think.
Yep.
Okay. Next question. Great question, though. Alvaro Ruiz Ramirez. Did any of you have the chance to see the new Barco light steering technology? Also, what is the main difference between Christie and Barco projectors used for home theater, if any? I have not seen light steering. Hopefully, it'll be at CEDIA. It's supposed to be pretty cool. Christie does not have that. They've got some other stuff potentially in the pipeline. What is different? In my opinion, not a whole lot. Christie's historically, for the money, give you more light output. They're both can be loud. They're both big. They're both can be used in commercial applications. Both companies take a lot of their commercial product and just rebrand it as residential. So they're both great. Barcode dominates the commercial area. I think they've got like 60%. Christie makes up a big part of the rest of that. Christie does all of the Dolby Vision cinemas with the Eclipses, or a commercial version of the Eclipse, or multiple Eclipses. So they're both big time commercial competitors.
Was that light steering that was not at our Mwave show this last time?
Mm-mm.
That's on a new model that's coming out, I suppose. I haven't followed it.
I don't know when it's coming out. Home theater, Denmark. So what are your thoughts about the THX HDMI cable?
That was interesting, and I think it followed along, and I think it was interesting primarily to me because it followed along with what you were talking about. Like, they had a couple kind of cool business ideas. This was brought up in a previous podcast, and we were asked to look into it a little bit. Effectively, the company decided, hey, we're not going to have like 5 different lines for different lengths. Like a lot of cables have that, and the consumer doesn't even understand, like, well, when do I buy this cable, or when do I buy this cable, or whatever. They only want to have one cable per line, and they're changing the size of the wire to account for the voltage drops and stuff based on the distance. So maybe more companies do this, maybe they don't. I don't have any idea. But they were addressing the things you're talking about, like different distances require different voltages in order to have a successful connection. And they said, we've done lots of testing on this, and we figured out what works best. And for each length, we're going to have one model, and this model is going to work reliably because we've done that testing, and we're using the right size wire, and we're using the right size resistance and the right size to make it work. Now, how much of that is marketing speak versus what other companies are doing? Like maybe they're all basically kind of doing that, perhaps. But I do know, like if you go to, for instance, Rui Pro, and you try to buy a 50-foot cable, you got like 7 options. Or if you go to Monoprice and you want to buy a 50-foot cable, you got like 7 options, probably more at Monoprice. Why do I have 7 options? Which one do I want? How do I know which one is the best one for my application? The descriptions are filled with stuff that doesn't even make sense as far as trying to differentiate what product is what. What is the difference between these products? And I think they were just trying to say, like, none of that makes any sense for the consumer. It's already difficult. The same sort of things Ryan talking about to get a cable to work reliably. We're taking that difficulty out as best we can. That was
they say they are. So
yes,
maybe, hopefully, we'll see.
Cool. I hope it works out for him. I hope it's legit.
I hope, yeah. Mike Ortiz, hey, planning some GSG BTS dual sub sealed 18-inch subs, 2 of them to put in my 17 by 17 by 10 LR Ultimax 2 drivers. How much power should I feed them? What amp should I be looking at? Only experiences with Crown. Jonathan, go.
Yeah, so if you're doing sealed, you probably don't want to go with a Crown with DSP because they have a non-defeatable high-pass filter, which means it rolls off everything below 20 hertz. And we've talked about it on several podcasts in the sense that Crown is pro audio. Like they're a company that does live sound. And in live sound, you don't want less than 20 hertz. It eats up power.
Too
it
much
can
power.
blow subs. If someone does a sound in the mic or drops a mic or something, you can basically amplify sound you don't want that can blow a driver, damage a driver, or just blow a circuit. So they roll it off. They intend to roll it off. And most of the live sound pro audio companies do that. There are companies that very much intend to not do that. And they're looking at something like speaker power. Behringer actually surprisingly does a pretty good job at having power at low frequencies. There are threads on database forum for this where people have measured and given you real feedback. For the cheap ones, if you're asking the question here, you're probably looking at like a Behringer NU series. And for a more premium product, you can look at like a speaker power amp. Those would be the recommendations off the cuff that are pretty common and pretty fair to go.
Yep.
There's CVR amps, there's Chinese clones of like LG amps, that kind of stuff that people really like. I personally wouldn't buy those Chinese clones because I've seen, let me put it this way. I've known probably about 8 people that have bought those, and every single person that has bought them has had them fail. Like some of them multiple.
Yep.
So they're not in the reliability camp. One more thing I was going to say on that, and it eludes me. So if I think of it, I'll come back. Go ahead.
Okay. Brian Cobb, I need a new projector. I have a 150-inch SI Black Diamond XL. I watch almost exclusively sports with ambient light. Epson QL3000. I will never watch Harry Potter.
I like that
Which
line.
specs are important? Brightness.
Yeah, for a Black Diamond screen.
And if you're watching sports, brightness.
And Motion's got a really good frame interpolation engine that's going to make your sports all that much better.
Yeah.
Like, just in general, I think Epson's got a better engine for motion than the better panel, probably is the right terminology, than JVC. I haven't spent much time with Sony projectors in that regard, but Epson has better motion. And when you turn on frame interpolation, that's a rock slide for Epson.
I don't know that I would say better panel. I think they can get away with more because it's E-shifted.
I'm saying for motion. Like when you turn, I've done the Blur Buster motion tests in my room between the Epson and the JVC.
Oh, I agree.
With frame interpolation off, LCOS has more blurring than LCD. That's all I mean by
all
that.
I'm saying is that they may be able to get away with more because it's a lower resolution.
Could be.
That they're able to utilize other things because of more DLP chips takes more light, right? So it's, I think it's may have something to do with that. But I think the Epson QL3000 would be a great choice. I mean, your gain on your Black Diamond is abysmal. So
is that like what is the gain on that Black Diamond? Is that like a 0.2 or 0.4
I thought it
or
was
something?
Really low.
You might need more than the QL3000, mightn't he? That's 6,000 lumens. What are you running on that right now, Brian? What projector are you running on that right now? Yeah. And how many lumens?
Let us know. We'll come back to you. Home Theater Denmark asks, so Jonathan, about the Arendelle THX with 1 tweeter, how does that compare to M&K's S150, which got 3 tweeters in our THX Ultra?
I don't know if I've ever heard of MKS 150, but certainly by adding more tweeters, you can overcome some of the limitations, right? Every doubling of speakers gives you, if they're not co-located 3 dB, and if they are co-located 6 dB. So by adding 3 tweeters, if they're right next to each other, you're probably getting between 6 and dB more headroom, 6 and 9 dB more headroom in that ballpark. Mm-hmm. And that's not insignificant, right? If you're up on the limitations at 10 dB low reference and you add 6 or 9, it's probably getting closer to being THX reference capable. Also depending on the size of the room, of course. But I don't think I've ever heard the MKS 150. Have you, Ryan?
Nope. If it's soft dome, I still wouldn't do it.
So, now hold up a second, because like these JBL CVT 70J1s that I have, they have 16.
But you got like 5 million soft domes.
There's 16 soft domes, and they are capable of sustained 120 dB sound, like 125 dB peak, sustained 120 dB sound. So, like, if you get enough of their little friends, they can do the business.
Yeah, but
one's not enough.
3 is different than 16. I mean, come on.
Sure. But I don't know that the MK is trying to advertise to hit 120 dB sustained either. So there's a difference between a pro audio style build and a home theater style build.
Yeah. Coming back to Brian, he says it's 1.2. I looked at it and the website says 1.4.
There's no way.
That's what it says.
Is that a black screen, or is it just the Black Diamond, like, and it's a white screen? Okay, so someone's saying I'm thinking carbon black, which is 0.1. Black Diamond by name. Is there these screen people make up their gain numbers, Ryan?
Yeah,
you know
they
this.
do. I mean, but it's not going to be 0.4. I don't know what it is.
I want to see if it's a black or a white screen.
Regardless, I'm going to say the brighter you can get, the better.
And has Pixel Pusher measured it? Because that's going to be a better answer, at least comparative to other things.
Yeah. What does he have? Did he say what projector he has now? Oh, 1.4 is the original black diamond? Okay. It's not black. It's probably gray.
I'm going to look this up while we go into the next one, because there's a site here that Pixel Pusher 15 off AVS Forum has done some real nice work on measuring a bunch of different screens relative to each other. So not just in a vacuum, not just one at a time, but gotten like 30 screens and measured them all together. I want to find that site and see if he's by chance measured that one to get some real world numbers around it.
Last question. So what tweeter would be best to hear the glass shattering and the chain going down the well in Lord of the Rings? I currently have Klipsch RP8000Fs and RP504Cs and RP600M for surrounds.
So that's going to depend on your room size, your distance, and your volume levels and stuff, right? So the RP8000F is a nice speaker, I believe. Does it reference capable? That's going to depend on the distance and how much power you're giving it. And whether I haven't actually. It'd be fun to do a compression test on one of those RP8000Fs. I haven't done
that.
Some of the rank and file clips, like I hear a lot of people on the forum saying clips is good for reference, period. Like that's kind of the entry level, and that's not true. It's just not true. And you can hear it once you've kind of trained yourself in this. You can hear it with your own ears when it's not. I'm not saying the RP8000F isn't. I don't know. But I'm just saying clips as a general rule is reference capable is not true. So see if you can find some compression graphs on that. Look up compression tests, dynamic compression tests, and see if you can find some numbers on that to see if it's reference capable and at what distance. And if it is, then you're not going to gain anything by moving to a different speaker. It's already reference capable. It already has the capability to do dynamics. If it's not, then you're going to get a little bit louder, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more distinct and dynamic sound that sounds more true to life and not rolled off or not muted, not tamed down, if you will.
I would say what is the best would be anything that has a very high sensitivity and that is capable of a pretty high sustained SPL level or SPL. Be my recommendation. And that limits you to really non-soft dome tweeters. So you've got AMT, you've got, not in every regard, but AMT. I mean, this goes for all of them, not in every regard, but for the most part. AMT, compression driver, horns, different types of horns, line arrays of different types, planar magnetics of certain types. There's many, many options. So I'm going to drop this in chat.
Typically, the most headroom or loudest capable is going to be a compression driver, like a high-end compression driver that's horn loaded. They're going to have high sensitivity, and they're going to be horn loaded, and that's going to have the most headroom. But it may not. They have kind of a distinct sound. I think all those type of tweeters have a distinct sound.
They do, absolutely.
And you may or may not like that.
That's why it's important to go back and listen to all of these, because you may find that you like the sound of one over the other. It's historically why I'm not a huge fan of horns, and then I ended up buying horns with the Black Swans, but they don't sound like horns. So there's many different options. The key, though, is high sensitivity and capable of a lot of SPL is what you're going to need to.
So Ryan just put the Pixel Pusher thread in there with the 31 screen materials reviewed, and he unfortunately did not review your Diamond Black XL. But I bet if you ask in that thread, it's a very long thread with a lot of participation. I bet somebody's measured it in there. So you just put a comment in there and ask your question. What's the native gain on the screen? I'd be kind of curious for you to know relative to other screen options.
I will say, though, that there are a couple manufacturers that don't lie. Stewart's usually pretty accurate. I'll give them credit for that. Seymour's usually pretty accurate, too, on their unbenchmarked number. So let's go back to Brian about the gain. He said his previous projector was a VW600, which was a rated 1,700 lumens.
That's not very watchable on a low gain screen, but it sounds like this is on a low gain screen.
His
So,
previous screen was a Studio Tech 130, so at 1.3.
oh, yeah.
I think the Epson QL3000 with 6,000 lumens would be pretty good. Now, how much of that it's actually delivering, I don't know. We'll have to see when people are actually able to measure that. But Epson, especially given the lawsuits that they're throwing out, I think is going to be pretty accurate with what they're saying. Because if they're suing everybody else for it, they better walk the walk, which they historically do. Anything else, Jonathan? Before we wrap up, we went a little long tonight.
Yeah, let's end it here pretty quickly, but let's go to this Pedro, chat that's in there in the last 3 or so, at least on my screen.
This one?
Yeah.
In my small room, I noticed that 90 to 100 hertz left and right crossover give me the best frequency response. It's still worth the upgrade from SVS Ultra Bookshelf to a better tower if the crossover will be 90 to 100 hertz. I watch movies minus 15 volume.
I'm going to say that's a very strong no. You do not need to upgrade. You're only running at negative 15, which means that you're very low volume. Unless you're in an enormous room, that's a low volume, and your speakers are not going to be struggling very much. And you probably won't even notice a difference if you go from an SVS Ultra Bookshelf to a tower if your crossover is at 90 to 100 hertz. That's like the definition of not using your money the right way in the home theater environment. Now, if you were going to say I listen to like -8 or -5 or reference sometimes, then absolutely. But -15 doesn't work a speaker very hard.
Yeah. You may end up liking the way another speaker sounds because subjectively there is a characteristic of the way different drivers and speakers sound, but
well, sure. I was taking in the context of buying an SVS tower. If he's talking a different tower, then yeah, the world's your oyster. You very well might like a different speaker better.
Mm-hmm.
If you're staying within the same family and expecting a difference just because your speaker is a tower, but you're still using a 90 to 100 hertz crossover, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Tower?
An SVS Ultra Bookshelf versus a tower.
Oh,
I assumed SVS tower, but maybe he's talking about a different tower.
Yeah.
Ultimately, a 90 to 100 hertz crossover cuts out so much bass you would be surprised. Like if you played them full range with a 90 hertz to 100 hertz crossover between a bookshelf and a tower speaker, there's not going to be very much difference between those two because you've cut out what that tower's doing.
If you, especially at -15, if you start raising the volume, you may start hearing compression on the lack of surface area from the woofers, but
a lot of times between, like, if you're staying with the same line, let's say you did an SVS Ultra Bookshelf and an SVS Ultra Tower, a lot of times they have the same tweeter in them, like the exact same tweeter.
They do.
So the difference is that you have more mid-range or bass drivers, but you're cutting that out for the most part with your 90 hertz crossover.
Yeah, I think and maybe you didn't mean in the same line. So I think Aaron did a Klippel on the latest towers, I think, and I don't think they measured all that great.
So the diamond encrusted aligned tweeters were not up to the marketing blitz?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think he was very happy with them. So maybe instead of focusing on that, I think you should focus on maybe something with a frequency response or a listening characteristic that you subjectively prefer. It's up to you. I like, now that I've gotten high sensitivity speakers, I won't go back, but I think it's about trying to find something that makes sense to you. And in order to do that, if you really like what you have, you'd really want to do a direct A/B comparison, preferably blind, to figure out if you do like something else. Because Jonathan and I both know if you don't do it blind and you unhook things and plug it back in, you are only as good as your subconscious allows you to be. Carbon black is the one with gain of 0.2, is what Brian says. Anything else, Jonathan?
No, it looks like we missed a few questions in here, but it's okay, I think. You guys can reach out to me as Archaea on AVS Forum if you want to send me a PM. Or Ryan, you can throw your email up there as far as your...
it's in the signature. It's in the description. So you guys can... And I think your YouTube channel's on there too. So if you want to comment or send Jonathan or I an email, feel free to. We try and answer as many questions as we can. Direct emails are probably the best for that kind of thing. And don't think that, I'm going to try and sell you something just because you reach out. Jonathan and I I think above everything else, just want people to have a good experience and make sure that they're tackling things in an objective way. And at some point, not having to reinvent the wheel and fall down the same shafts that we have both fallen down, because it's never fun to.
And we got to figure out a little bit too on how to get this working better for me to be able to star things, because like right now, like there's another super chat that popped up, but I can't star things, and our interface is kind of wonky right now.
Yeah, we'll get it better. That out, or I need to go back to StreamYard. We'll figure it out. I will not be on next week, so you can do it, or you can take a break.
Okay.
But I will not be on probably for the next 2 weekends because of Cedia. I think I leave Sunday night, the 7th, that night. So I don't think I'll be home for that one either. But you're more than welcome to do it, or you can take a break.
Okay.
Go clean some carpet.
I'll probably continue it if possible, and we'll just maybe bring in some other of the Kansas City guys or something at that point.
That works.
We have another super chat. Hey, Christian, thanks for the $5. Very much appreciated. And you guys, of course, you don't need to do that, but we really do appreciate it. It's nice. It helps support the channel. Thank you very much.
Yep, it is much appreciated, guys, but never required. It is very nice of you to do that, though. And in closing, I don't have anything else. I'm gonna go help my son because some of you may have seen him looking eerily back there at some point during the stream. Sad that I'm running 50 minutes late, so I'm gonna jump off here and go help him. But hopefully I'll have some
finish building the PC. He's like, Dad, I wanted the game tonight.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have some exciting stuff to talk about after Cedia. So look forward to that one. We'll go from there. Jonathan, great as always.
Yeah. Night, everybody.
Go push your THX button in your car. I had to throw it in sometime. Have a good night, guys. Until next time.